Today. Thank you for joining us for the Right Bite with Diabetes, host or presented by Alexis Roberts with the University of Georgia Extension, Fulton County, and then with Elizabeth Puckett with Fulton County Library Systems Adult Outreach Program, and me, Jessica House. I'm your wellness coordinator. So kind of exciting. We have probably one of our largest crowds today, so thank you everybody. And then exciting too, because we are starting off at a new time at noon now. So moving forward, everything will probably be around the lunchtime. So thank you for joining us. So what I'll do is go over some housekeeping items and then tell you about some wellness communication resources and then our upcoming wellness programs. All right, so housekeeping item is this is being recorded, and then also anything that we discussed today, any resources will be sent to you in a few days. All right, so next thing is I want to go over the communication resources that we have. The first one is the Fulton County Employee Facebook page. So you can find it one or two ways, either going to that link that is provided, and you'll get that in a few days, or you can search by Fulton County Employee. And so what we do is I have the resources on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Mondays will go over motivation. Wednesdays will be about nutrition and recipes. And then Friday is about exercising, fitness, and then some type of classes going on too. The next one is Fulco News, and that's published every Monday and Thursday, and you get it in your Fulton County issued email. And then the last one is called Mobile Health Consumer. And you can get this again one of two ways. You can either download it on your smartphone, or you can use your own computer and use the link provided, and you can set up an account that way. But I want to go over just a little bit about how great it is that we do have mobile health for us. So a couple of things. It's a benefits tool all in one. You can have your insurance card right on there. You can get reminders, health education, but most importantly, like for me as the wellness coordinator, we have challenges on there, and there could be quarterly challenges, there could be fitness challenges, but it's a really, really good tool, and we'll go over that in just a second. But we'll finish up with starting with our upcoming wellness activities. So we got our next wellness webinar coming up in 2 weeks on September 24th. We'll be from 12 to 1, and we're going to go over, Alexis will be going over portion distortion and substitutions. She'll discuss how easy it is to misjudge our portions and how we can make small changes to improve our health. And then Elizabeth will be supplying some resources. But just like you did today, all you need to do is email employeewellness@fultoncountyga.gov, and then the Zoom link will be sent to you. Next one, we talked about this last time, and I'm really excited because we're being able to bring back the cooking demos. So we'll have one October, that's October 7th from 12:30 to 1, November 11th from 12:30 to 1, and December 2nd, 12:30 to 1. And again, email Employee Wellness and you'll get the Zoom link. All right, moving on. So we just got done talking a little bit about mobile health, and this is one, the Wellbeing Journeys is one of their quarterly activities. And so it's, again, these well-being things are really important, especially right now during this time, but it can help you. You can do some assessments, and you can learn more about your nutrition, your resiliency needs, stress, sleep, physical activity, financial well-being, and social well-being. And so what you do, you'll do some assessments, learn a little bit about, say, such as your resiliency, and then they'll give you some tips. And just by doing that, you'll get points. And there's also other points throughout the quarter too, doing these different challenges. And all you have to do is go into your challenge section on the mobile health app. And there could be challenges such as easy as, did you brush your teeth? Did you eat breakfast this morning? And then further up, going into a little more challenging things like, did you walk 3,000 steps today? So stuff like that. So that's the quarterly challenges. And then we talked about the fitness challenges, and we have one coming up on October 4th, so that's coming up real soon, Fall Foliage Tour Step Challenge. And so this is the 4-week challenge. What you'll do is each time that you take steps, you'll either log it in manually, or you'll sync it up with the mobile app device, or mobile app, and sync it up with your device, and then it'll automatically upload in there. And so each time that you do that, you get points. And at the end of the competition, with everybody who has completed it, you'll get points, and then whoever has the most points will be thrown into a raffle for a Fitbit Alta. And it's really good too because you have a leaderboard and you can see how well you're doing against your colleagues. It's really, really fun that way. And then the other thing that we're doing is another program or another challenge November 6th, and it's called Maintain, Don't Gain. And it's a 6-week challenge going through, starting November, going through Thanksgiving, and then up until close to New Year's. And I'm glad that we have this challenge because research shows that the average American gains 1 to 5 pounds over the holidays. So this is a perfect timing for this challenge. And what you need to do is each week you're going to log your weight. Simple as that. You'll get some healthy tips, some recipes, and then at the end of the 6 weeks, if either you've maintained your weight or you've lost weight, then you'll be entered into a raffle to win a Fitbit Alta. So definitely good timing resources there. And then the last one is Total Brain Challenge. What I wanted to thank, a big thank you to Kaiser because they're offering this all to active employees, regardless if you're with Kaiser or Anthem. But it's learning more about your mental well-being. So if you have high levels of stress or you need to maintain your focus or staying positive, this challenge or this feature is going to help you with that. And you'll do different assessments and do different challenges. And by doing those challenges, you get points. And at the end of each quarter, if you have 2,000 brain points, then you'll be entered into a raffle, and it'll be for a $25 Amazon gift card. So if you are currently in the 3rd quarter challenge, it's going to end September 30th. So definitely continue with all the challenges and the exercises that you're doing to get your brain points. All right. I'm going to turn it over now to Alexis so we can learn a little bit more about diabetes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica, for giving us the rundown on Newell's programs. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And then Jessica, if you can just make sure that you're seeing the PowerPoint, okay? And I think we had something in the chat. Jessica, I can't tell if that's for you. Can you guys see my PowerPoint? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna assume so because I don't see anything else telling me otherwise. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming and joining us today on this Thursday afternoon. So my name is Alexis Roberts, and I am a registered dietitian, and I'm also a county extension agent with Fulton County Extension. And so essentially what I do is I serve as a community educator. So I teach classes in nutrition, food safety, food preservation, healthy housing, and financial literacy. So this is, I think, our 4th partnership that I've done with Fulton County Wellness. So I'm really excited to be here, and then also the library, and you guys are going to hear from Elizabeth Puckett a little bit later. So let's go ahead and get started. So do you know the prevalence of diabetes in Georgia? So in the chat function, guys, can you tell me, what do you think it is? Do you think 1 in 9 people in Georgia have diabetes, 1 in 15, 1 in 5? Oh, I have 1 in 5 twice. Excuse me. So maybe it's that one because it's twice. Just kidding. Okay, so I've got an A, 1 in 5. Let's see. Any other responses? B. B and D are the same. B. Okay. All right. So we've got some answers coming in. So it is going to be A. So 1 in 9 people. So that's a little bit less than 1 in 10, or a little bit more than 1 in 10. So we know a little bit, it's about 12 to 13% of people in Georgia have diabetes. In terms of like Georgia, we kind of rank, we're not like the lowest state, but we're not exactly the healthiest state either. So what is diabetes? So if we're going to talk about this, let's just go ahead and define it. So what happens with diabetes, it is a problem when our body's ability to use the sugar from the foods that we eat. So we know the foods that we eat, for the most part, get broken down into sugar. And that sugar, that blood glucose, gives our body energy. And what happens over time with diabetes is our body's ability to use that sugar, that energy, isn't as efficient. So we also have something called insulin. So insulin is what tells our body, or our cells in our body, to intake this insulin. So when I eat food, so say if I have a hamburger and I eat my hamburger and I have everything kind of breaks down to different forms and I have some blood glucose, insulin is going to tell my body to basically open up and take in this blood glucose. So we kind of like to say insulin is the key and the house is my body or my cell. And so what happens when I have food or when I eat, basically my energy or my blood glucose or glucose is kind of like, hey, come in, let me in. And so the insulin is going to be the key that opens the door for my body to let that glucose in and to use that energy. But what happens with diabetes is there are two things that can happen. So if I have type 1 diabetes, my body doesn't make the insulin that allows that allows the door to open to let the glucose in. Or you can have type 2 where your body can make the insulin, but the door just doesn't open. So over time, especially with type 2, our body may not respond to insulin. So either our body can still make insulin, but it's not responding, or our body stops producing enough insulin that doesn't allow that door to open and use that energy. So what ends up happening over time is that because that door is not opening, right, then I'm going to have a buildup of glucose in my blood. And that's how we have high blood sugar. So there are different numbers that we ideally would want. So we have our regular glucose, which is a type of sugar in our blood. When we kind of go to the doctor every year, they normally do like a fasting for us, and we have certain goals for that. And if you are diabetic, sometimes they recommend checking your blood sugar after you eat, and there's a certain range that we want to go as well. I won't go into a ton of detail about that. So your A1C, just so you know, tells your doctor your blood sugar over 3 months. So this is kind of the new clinical standard of care. Typically, if you are at risk for diabetes, they start to take your A1C. And essentially what we know what happens over time is when we have excess glucose in our blood, that it starts to stick to our blood cells. So when they take this value or take your blood for your A1C, they're basically looking at, hey, how much blood sugar is stuck to the blood cells? And that's how we know your average over 3 months. So there are different levels. So you can be pre-diabetic based off of your A1C. And then normally they say, so that's about 5.7 to 6.4. And then a little bit higher, if it's higher than 6.5, typically that's a diabetes diagnosis. But the goal, if you do have diabetes, is try to keep your A1C under 7. Some doctors will tell you a little bit less. It's kind of up to you and your physician. Okay, so now getting to a little bit more of nutrition. So essentially, when we eat, we know that most of the food breaks down into glucose based off of what we eat. So most of the time you'll hear about carbs, especially with diabetes, and people say like carbs are bad. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but that's mainly because 90% of the carbs that we eat break down into blood glucose or sugar. So for protein, that's about 60%, and then for fat, that's about 10%. So we also kind of hear that most of the food that we eat typically are carbs, and that's because our body runs on that energy, because we know that blood sugar or that sugar is energy, and that's how our body primarily functions, is based on that. So just to go into some intro or some general information about diabetes. So this is really important because diabetes, unfortunately, is a disease that affects our entire body. And so there are a lot of different complications that can happen when it is not managed well over time. So we can have some issues of eye disease, which is going to be huge. So sometimes the first people that may diagnose, or not diagnose, but recommend that someone go see their physician for diabetes could actually be the eye doctor. And so one of those symptoms is because you have a rapid change in your vision. So we know that over time, if our blood sugar is increased, it can also raise our blood sugar, and it puts a lot of pressure on the smaller kind of vessels in our blood. So like our blood vessels in our eyes, and it can weaken those over time, which changes our vision. So a lot of times if people have really large changes in vision, their optometrist will say, hey, you should probably go and see your doctor. So heart disease, kidney disease, impotence, we can have nerve damage, poor circulation, higher risk for stroke, osteoporosis, some skin challenges. So it can be very serious if it's not managed very well. But the good news is that these complications do not have to happen. You can prevent or delay type 2 diabetes, and complications can be prevented. So I know when I was growing up, you know, like so I'm African American, so African Americans are higher risk for diabetes. And then also my grandfather had diabetes. And so I always kind of thought, people told me, it's like, oh, if diabetes runs in your family, that means you're automatically going to have it. And what we know now is that is not necessarily true. We know that there are some risk factors that happen that put things at play that can increase your risk, but that's not true. And we're going to talk about that in these next couple slides. So how many people do you guys think are at risk for developing diabetes, just from the general public? So this isn't people that aren't going to necessarily going to have it, but this is people that we kind of term as pre-diabetes. Maybe they're on that cusp or they're at an increased risk. How many people, we'll do the 1 through, it's a 1 through 10 number again. And you can kind of put it in the chat. How many people do you all think, 1 and what number do you think are at risk for developing diabetes or would be diagnosed with pre-diabetes? Okay, I have a 1 in 6, 1 in 5, 1 in 8. Okay. I'll give you guys a hint. It's a little bit lower. The number's a little bit, it's lower than you think it would be. Well, higher. The rate is higher than you think it would be. 1 in 8. Okay, so we've got some good guesses going. So it's actually going to be about, 1 in 10 people are at risk. And then 1 in 3 people have pre-diabetes. And so we say that people are at risk for pre-diabetes. It could be based off of their current glucose numbers. It could also be based off their lifestyle, and their weight can put you at risk for pre-diabetes. So 1 in 10 people in general in America have diabetes, and then 1 in 3 of people have pre-diabetes. So that's a pretty large number. That's over 30% of Americans we're saying are at an increased risk, a significantly increased risk for developing diabetes. So what increases these risks? So we know that smoking, diet, weight, genetics, so genes, hypertension, your family history, your cholesterol, your waist size, and age put us all at risk potentially for diabetes. The good thing is that there are some that we can change, right? So I can't change my age. So as we get older, our body just doesn't function as well. So that does increase our risk. Or family history. You know, I can't change my family history that my grandfather had diabetes. Or if I had a high birth weight, which means I was just born at a bigger baby, I can't change how the size I was if I was born. Or if you had a baby that weighed more than 9 pounds, that's a risk factor. But as we can see kind of on the left side compared to the right, that there are more things that we can change versus things that we can't. So for instance, we can change our weight. We can change our waist size. We can help to control our blood pressure. We can increase our physical activity. Physical activity is so important. We're just finding out more and more how important it is to be physically active. Smoking, I feel like that's one of those things that just puts you at risk for all kinds of things. And then having high cholesterol. So some of those things are genetic, right? So I could have increased risk for high blood pressure based off of my genes and also cholesterol, but even within that, I can make lifestyle changes that can help to reduce those as well. So things we can change. So this is a pre-diabetes risk test put out by the National Diabetes Prevention Program. And this is something I will send out in a link, or Jessica will send out a link to you guys. And I would definitely encourage you to take it, and then to also have your family members take it, because sometimes you're at a higher risk than you think you are. And it's kind of just good to know where you stand. So we will be sending out that link to you guys. So how do we know that diabetes can be prevented? So there's the Diabetes Prevention Program, and we know that through lifestyle changes, we can reduce our risk at least by 58%. And then we even saw the older you are, they found that it was more beneficial. So in senior audiences, they were able to reduce their risk by 70%. And essentially what we know, if we're in that pre-diabetes stage, if we can lose about 7% of our current body weight and increase our physical activity to at least 150 minutes a week, which is about 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, then we can help to reduce our risk significantly. And that's even for people that do have a diabetes diagnosis. Even losing weight can help your body's response to insulin. So your body can kind of use a little bit better. And with lifestyle changes and weight loss and physical activity, people sometimes are able to come off of medication. So if you do have diabetes and you are in that current state, you don't always have to be there necessarily. You can have some lifestyle changes that does improve your care and your outcomes. Okay, so next we're going to get into more about the eating and kind of lifestyle changes. So we have 3 different types of carbs. We have starches, sugars, and fiber. That's how we kind of break it down. So starches, these are going to be kind of like, I think normally when people say they're going on a diet, I feel like these are the foods that they try to limit. So normally bread, cereals, pasta, rice, your starchy vegetables. So can someone tell me, what are some starchy vegetables? You can put it in the chat. Just list out some starchy vegetables when we say starchy vegetables. So I'll throw one out there. Potatoes, yeah, that's one of the first one that people think of. We have corn. What are some other ones? Corn, we have corn again. What else is out there? So beans are one, yep. Potatoes again. Peas are one, actually like your English peas, those are actually considered starchy foods. Butternut squash is considered a starchy food. Carrots, that's a close one. So I feel like there's some misinformation about carrots. Carrots is actually non-starchy, but I have heard people say that before. But yeah, so there's a few different, I'm trying to think of a few other ones that are starchy, but for some reason I can't come to my mind. But so those are the ones we kind of want to limit, but not necessarily eliminate. So then we have sugars. So these are added or natural sugars. So that's going to be our sugars that occur naturally in like fruit or in milk, or kind of like sugar cane sugar. And then we have fiber, and we're going to find fiber in our whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. So these are kind of our main carbohydrates. And so why this is important is because carbohydrates, we kind of talked about, or we saw the chart earlier, 90% of the carbohydrates or carbs that we eat break down into break down into sugar. So the name of the game is actually going to be controlling our carbohydrates. So do you think that you should eliminate carbs? Do we need carbs? Are they important? If I'm afraid of getting diabetes, should I just stop eating carbs because it gets converted into blood sugar? Sorry, let me check the chat. No, right? No. And why is that? Why? Can someone tell me there's like one organ in our body that like thrives off of carbs? Can someone tell me what that organ is? And it may not be something that you think about as an organ. Or I'll say like major body part that thrives off of carbs. Can anyone tell me which one it is? And it's okay if you don't know. It's kind of why we say that, especially before kids go to school and before they take tests, they need to eat. The brain, yeah. So our brain actually functions primarily off of carbs. So this is why when people, like if you don't eat, you start to get like little dizzy, it's hard to concentrate and things like that. It's because our brain primarily functions on carbs. So the body is an amazing machine, and it can convert other things, like it can convert things like from muscle or from proteins into glucose, but that's not the primary function. It normally likes to get that from carbs. So do we want to eliminate carbs? No. We know that our body needs carbs. It's really important to how we function, but the thing is typically what happens is that we eat too many. So the name of the game is to make sure that we portion control the carbs and foods that we are eating and make sure that we are making healthier choices. So what does that look like? So one of the big things that we can do is to drink more water and low-fat milk and not sugary beverages. So most of the sugar that we get every day in our diet actually comes from the things that we drink. And a lot of times we don't necessarily think about that. And so when we drink things, it's actually going to raise our blood sugar a lot faster than when we eat them. And it's because it enters our bloodstream more quickly. So one of the big things we could do is actually to reduce our intake of sugary beverages. So if you are drinking things like diet drinks or things with artificial sweeteners, those aren't going to raise your blood sugars. But the harm of those can be is that like on a sweetness scale, artificially sweetened things are actually sweeter than regular or like natural sugar. So we know that the more sweet things we want, typically the more sweet things we eat, the more sweet things we want. So in general, we do want to try to fill up more so on water or kind of low-fat milk primarily. So kind of avoiding sugar sweetened beverages is really going to help with our glucose control, especially if we're drinking, multiple sugary drinks a day. So we think about sweet tea, lemonades, sodas, different things like that. Think about when you go out to eat and you get a sweet tea and then you get a refill and how much that really can be and how that adds up really quickly. So the next big thing is to eat more whole grains. One thing we know is that Americans are not eating enough whole grains. So what makes a grain whole, right? And so typically it's what we call our whole grains compared to our refined or processed. People like to say processed, but it's really just refined. So essentially what we know is in nature, grains come in three parts. And when we refine them, so we take a piece of whole wheat bread and we kind of make it into white bread, right? We take away two parts. So we take away the bran, that's this outer part here, and then we take away the germ, and that's the center part here. And when we take those two really important parts away, we're taking away a lot of nutrients. So we're taking away a lot of fiber, B vitamins, and we know there's some antioxidants as well in whole grains. B vitamins, healthy fats, and also some protein too that can be taken away. And so what that fiber does, actually, I'll ask you guys, so what is kind of the main thing people say, why is fiber so important? Why is it so essential that we get a lot of fiber? Digestion, I think that's the biggest one we think of. It keeps us regular. So in terms of diabetes, why is it important to have the fiber if it aids in digestion? And I can take a second. So what does that extra fiber do in terms of controlling my blood sugar for diabetes? Slows glucose consumption. Yeah. So essentially what we know is if we have more bulk or kind of this fibrous material in our bodies as we eat, it's going to slow down that digestion. And so it's going to allow the sugar from the food that I'm eating to kind of go into my blood at a slower pace. So it's not just kind of shocking it immediately. So it's going to kind of just enter it a little bit more slowly, which is going to help me to manage my blood sugars. Also, what it's going to do is it's going to help me to be more full because of that fiber. It's adding some bulk. So you can add fiber and add that bulk without adding calories. So when I have that, it's not only slowing the glucose that's entering my blood, it's also helping me to feel more full. So therefore, I'm going to also eat less. So therefore, I'm going to be eating less sugar. And then if I have more fiber, then that's going to allow me to kind of go longer without eating as well. Another really great thing about fiber, certain types of fiber can actually help to lower your cholesterol as well. So we have it for digestion, blood sugar control, cholesterol control, and then also weight management, because if I'm eating a lot of fiber, I'm eating less. So we want to have more whole grains. So we kind of talked about, so with whole grains, it's going to decrease our risk for diabetes and heart disease. So we already talked about it helps to lower our cholesterol. More fiber is better. You want at least 3 servings of whole grains a day. We say at least try to make half of your grains whole. So, you know, that's having whole wheat bread, brown rice, that's oatmeal, even popcorn, bulgur, and things like that. So those high fibrous things, we can also get fiber through eating fruits and vegetables, which we'll talk about next. So we do want to make sure that we eat more fruit. So we don't want to have too much, and we want to make sure that we're going with the serving. So if we do have diabetes, too much fruit can increase our blood sugar amount. So this is where portion control is going to be really important. So if you do have diabetes or at a high risk, then I would pay attention to your portion sizes when it comes to fruit. So for example, the portion size of a banana is typically about half of the large bananas that we see is technically 1 portion, or for grapes, 17 grapes is a portion of grapes. So we do want to make sure with fruit that it is really good for us, but we don't want to overdo it because fruit does contain natural sugar. So it's always going to be better to either have fresh fruit, or you can do canned, but just try to do it without any added sugar. You also want to try to eat the whole part of the fruit, so you're getting all of the fiber that's in there. And then limit any fruit juices that you have, even if it's 100% juice and it doesn't have any sugar added. Just the mechanism of chewing sends something to our brain that's like, oh, okay, I'm full, I need to stop eating, versus if I drink it. And then anything that we drink, once again, is going to increase our blood sugar a lot more quickly than if we were eating it. So we can also have fruit for a dessert or a snack. So instead of maybe having potato chips or having, you know, ice cream, something that's not healthy. So of course, you know, ice cream, potato chips every now and then, but most of the time, you know, we do want to try to make healthy choices. So having fruit kind of instead of those foods. And then making sure that we have a variety. So a lot of times we eat a lot of the same foods, which isn't necessarily bad, but if we're eating a lot of the same foods and a lot of those foods, if they are the same color, then that can be a sign that we're not really getting enough nutrients, or we're not getting a variety of nutrients. So with fruits and vegetables, each color that we see actually represents different nutrients. So we always recommend that you color your plate to get a variety of nutrients. Okay. So we want to eat more vegetables, the non-starchy kind. So not that starchy vegetables are bad. Potatoes definitely get a bad rap. They actually are like really high in niacin. They have like really good levels of potassium. And they're not bad for us. It's just typically we eat too much. So that's another thing. The serving size of a potato is actually about 1/4 of a potato. So typically we eat the whole thing and then we add sour cream on it and then we add bacon, and then we're eating too much, right? So if we even half that potato or quarter that potato, then that's good. But primarily we do want to make sure that we eat more non-starchy vegetables. This is like the biggest area where we're lacking, is getting our non-starchy vegetables in. The most popular vegetables in America are tomatoes, I think because they go on burgers, and then potatoes because they're fries. So we do want to make sure that we have a variety of non-starchy vegetables, so getting our different colors in. So from deep yellows, your orange and dark green vegetables. So all of the vegetables that I have here are going to be our non-starchy kind. So those are things like carrots, beets, any lettuce, your bell peppers, any of your summer squashes like zucchini, or your yellow squash, cauliflower, broccoli. So all of those are going to be non-starchy, and they contain such a small amount of carbs that it's not really going to raise your blood sugar unless you just have like a ton at one time, which is highly unlikely. So these are kind of what, it's almost like a free food in a way. It's not really going to raise your blood sugar because it's non-starchy vegetables. So it's important, or try to aim to have at least 2 at lunch or at dinner. And then even they can make really great snacks or salads, or put them in soups. So another thing that we can do is to improve our eating is to eat on a smaller plate. So this plate that I have here, this is what we call the diabetes plate method. So this is a way of managing your diabetes through your plate. So if you do have a diabetes diagnosis, typically they say with eating, you can do the plate method, or you can count carbs. I'm not going to get into carb counting today because it's really clinical. But this is the plate method, and this is just a really easy method to make sure that you're portioning your foods correctly. So the most important part of this plate method is to make sure that you have a 9-inch plate. So the way how much we eat is typically the size of our plate. So if you ever notice, the bigger plate you have, the more you put things on. One of my favorite examples I like to give is there was a study in the University of Central Florida, and they did a popcorn study. And so they gave people large bags of popcorn and medium bags of popcorn. And some people got fresh popcorn and some people got stale popcorn, like 14-day-old popcorn. And what they found is that even when people say, if you're given like the medium container, the average person ate so much. But when given the large container, I think with the regular popcorn, people ate about 40% more when they had the larger container. But with the stale popcorn, they still ate about 30% more. So even when food doesn't taste good, just because we have a larger container, we are more likely to eat more. So therefore, one of the biggest things we can do is to start with a smaller container. So a 9-inch plate, that's typically a little bit bigger than a salad plate. Most plates that you buy in the store, I don't think I've ever bought a 9-inch plate because you can't really find them. You have to like really look out for it. But a lot of the paper plates that you can buy are actually more of 9 inches. So next time you go in the grocery store, or you go shopping for plates, or just measure your own plate at home and say, hey, how many inches is my plate? So you want to start with a 9-inch plate, and then you want to fill half of it with non-starchy fruits and vegetables. And then this quarter is for a whole grain product or starchy vegetables. So that could be a roll, or this could be a pasta, or it could be your potato, corn, or something like that. So we only want that to be a quarter of our plate. And then you want to fill your other quarter with lean protein, and then a small serving of fresh fruit. So once again, you do want to make sure you are going by that serving size, and then another small serving of milk, and which is typically about 8 ounces, or some sort of dairy like yogurt or something like that. So this is kind of what's considered a healthy plate for diabetes management. And I can get you guys a handout on this as well. Okay, so what about fat? So fat does not raise your blood glucose very much. So that's not something we're concerned about specifically with raising our blood glucose. But we know that a high fat intake is not necessarily good for our heart. So we want to make sure that when we do have fats, that they're mostly healthy fats. We know that about 1 tablespoon of oil or margarine is about 100 to 120 calories. So it can add up really quickly. So you always want to make sure that you're measuring your fat, especially when you're cooking, because I know it can be really easy to, have your little olive oil container and just go do, 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 do. But say if I end up having like 3 tablespoons, if I'm sauteing onions or something like that versus 1, I just increase whatever my dish is by like 200 calories. And that definitely adds up over time. So it counts as a fat serving. So 1 teaspoon of oil, butter, or regular margarine, 1 tablespoon of light margarine. I know kind of maybe like 10 years ago, margarine got a really bad rap because of partially hydrogenated oils and trans fat that was in margarine. Those have now been removed per the FDA. So margarine is actually a healthier option than it used to be. So about 1 tablespoon of mayonnaise/salad dressing, or 2 tablespoons of light salad dressing or mayonnaise are considered a fat serving. And then 1 tablespoon of peanut butter. So what can you measure your foods with? One of the biggest things that we recommend is actually measuring out our foods for portion control, because typically when we know that when people eyeball it, or when we say, oh, I think that's about a cup, we're typically wrong. And so one of the things that's better to do is to actually just measure it out ourselves. So you can do that with a measuring cup or a measuring spoon. So with meats, excuse like the poor clip art. So with meats, we want to try to limit our portion sizes to about 3 ounces. Normally people say this is kind of what part of your hand is about 3 ounces, people normally say when it comes to meat. There's like one body part people say you can kind of compare it to. Can anyone tell me in the chat? What is considered 3 ounces, a serving of 3 ounces of meat? Okay, I'll go ahead and give it away. Typically, we say it's about the palm of our hand. Yep, the inside palm. So the palm of our hand, or about a deck of cards, typically. So a starchy vegetable, we want to limit that to about 1/2 of a cup. Our non-starchy vegetables, we recommend having a cup. Fresh fruit, limiting it to about 1/2 a cup. 1 slice of bread or a serving of bread is about 1 ounce. This is a huge one for pasta and grains. So a serving size, sorry, this slide I got is from an older presentation. It's actually about 1/3 of a cup is a serving size of pasta or rice. So you can definitely have more than that. But typically, like when we get spaghetti or something like that, it's like 1.5 cups or something like that. So if we're trying to do portion control, we kind of want to start with like 1/3 cup measurements and kind of go from there. But a serving size of pasta, like rice or things like that, is actually 1/3 cup. So some things like that. So we recommend kind of, if you're trying to get more into portion control, is to measure everything for 2 weeks. It's the same with kind of calorie counting. When we think we're calorie counting, we're like, oh, maybe that was like 300 calories. Typically it's more than we think. And then try to drop it off to measuring once a week, and then just make sure that you practice. So like I said, we do tend to eat a lot of the same foods over and over again. So you're not going to have to measure your foods forever, because typically, you'll learn what it looks like. But just initially, if you're trying to decrease your portions, that can be a really good thing, is to measure things out. So why portion control is so important with diabetes is that we're trying to control how much energy or blood sugar enters our body at one time. So say if I have 3 slices of pizza, right? And maybe my serving size are like 1.5. right? So I'm having double the amount of sugar that's entering my blood at one time. But if I cut my portion back, then my blood sugar is not going to spike as much because it's not getting so much food at one time. So the name of the game is to try to keep things level as much as possible, and that we can do that a little bit more with portion control. So we kind of want to control how much blood is entering our, not blood, how much sugar is entering our blood at one time, and we can do that through the amount of food that we eat. So this is just another example of things you can do with your hands. So the palm size of your hand, we talked about your fist with fresh fruit, the size of fruit. So you could see like with some apples or some huge apples that they're going to be really bigger than the size of your hand. So then those are probably going to be more than one serving. Also milk serving, you don't want to pile your food too high, and you don't want any of your food or meats to be thicker than the deck of your palm as well. And then you can look at your teaspoon. It's kind of your thumb kind of right here, or a whole tablespoon equals the entire thumb if you're trying to measure things out. So other eating habits that might help. So the biggest thing is to eat your food slowly. We know that it takes about 20 minutes for our body to kind of register what's going on and how we've been eating. So if we kind of zoom through our food, say if I have a plate of food and I zoom through it, maybe it was more than what I needed to eat. Maybe I wasn't hungry enough or I didn't need to eat all of that food. But if I eat it all within 10 minutes, my body doesn't have the time to register of like, oh no, I'm full, please stop eating. And so that's not something we talked about, but our body has a natural mechanism in it that tells our brain, that signals to our brain when we stop eating. And that typically happens when our body starts releasing insulin. So when we eat, right, we said we have our blood sugar kind of goes up because it's giving us energy. And then our body says, oh, our blood sugar is high. Oh, we're eating. Let me send out some insulin. So at that point, then our brain's like, okay, I'm full. You know, insulin's been deployed. I've got some sugar in me. We're okay. But if I eat my food really quickly, my body doesn't have time to signal to my brain that I'm full. So we want to make sure that we focus on quality and not quantity and just really enjoy our foods and that they're really high quality foods instead of just trying to kind of get things in there. It's really unrecommended to skip meals or to overeat at one meal. So when we overeat, we know we're going to be spiking our blood sugars, or when we skip meals, that's going to make us more hungry. So we're more likely to overeat at our next meal. And when we have too much food or we have too much sugar in our blood, that's going to spike our blood sugar. You want to eat foods with at least 2 grams of fiber per serving, and then always drink water before our meals, because sometimes when we think we're hungry, we're just thirsty. So we always recommend trying to rate your hunger before you eat. So you ideally want to be between this kind of 4 to 7 range of being moderately hungry when you eat. So you don't want to be starving, right? Because when we know that when we're starving, when we're really hungry, we're more likely to make unhealthy choices and we're more likely to overeat. So I know this is true, like if I've been working late and I'm like, when I get home later and I'm really hungry, like, am I going to feel like cooking something healthy? Probably not. And that's when the drive-thru becomes really appealing. And then we don't want to eat when we're not really full, or when we're not really hungry. So say if maybe I go out to eat with a friend, she's like, oh, Alexis, I haven't seen you forever. Maybe I had a late lunch and I'm not really hungry, but you know, I feel obligated to go out because eating can also be very social. And I start to eat. Well, if I'm already full, then my body's not gonna kind of send that response to me to stop eating, because it's like, oh, we're full. Like it's not gonna be able to control that as much. So you want to try to eat when you're moderately hungry. And that we are humans, we're creatures of habit. So typically we know when we're hungry. I know, like, I get hungry at 9, then I get hungry again at 11, and then I have my mid-afternoon snack at 3, and then I eat my dinner. So just making sure we are kind of watching what we eat, and then when we're hungry. And then maybe I know, like at my 10 o'clock, when I get hungry at 10 or 11, I'm not really hungry. So normally I eat a yogurt or I eat like a piece of fruit, and that appeases me until lunch. So just knowing how your body works. And then you want to make it as challenging to overeat as possible. So try to avoid finger foods. So this is a huge thing. Like if we go out to eat and we get chips, right? It's just so easy to eat things really quickly when we're eating with our hands. So trying to limit that as much as possible. So using chopstick or cutting your fruit into pieces. My nephew is really big about this. He's 9 and he'll just like stuff big pieces of food into his mouth. So we have found like we just have to chop it up really small as much as possible. And even eating a sandwich with a fork or a knife can help to slow us down. So limit our convenience foods and eating out. So eating out is one of those huge things. I'll talk about that in another slide. And then use a shopping list. So anytime we're shopping, we always want to make sure we have a list so we stay on task, and to never shop when we're hungry, because when we're hungry, we're going to typically make unhealthy choices. And then to freeze leftovers and to use smaller plates, cups, and bowls. So what we do know is that better eating habits can improve your blood sugar, even if your weight doesn't change. So say if you start changing the way you eat, you practice portion control, and you say, hey, well, the scale's not really changing. Well, your blood sugar could be improving even though the scale's not changing. So don't be discouraged. And so just the other way to improve your eating is to eat out less. So typically when we eat out, we're gonna have larger portions. And then it's going to be foods that aren't really healthy, right? So when we eat out, we aren't going to typically have a lot of fruits and vegetables. It's going to be things that are going to be higher in fat, especially high sodium. Oh man, when you eat out, like the sodium amount just like goes through the roof. And then also sugar. And it's going to be higher calories. Just when we eat out, like we look at, there's a diabetes class that I teach at a hospital that I work at part-time. And we look at like if you made your own fries at home versus if you went to like fast food. And the carb amount changes drastically when you get fast food French fries versus if you make them in home. So the average American eats out about 3 days a week. So we can kind of decrease or cut back on that. We're automatically going to be cutting back typically on calories, sodium, fat, and sugar. And then the biggest thing is just to be physically active. We know that even if, say, it's recommended to walk 30 or to be physically active 30 minutes a day, but even if you break that up into like 10-minute time frames, if it's like 10 minutes in the morning, 10-minute walk at lunch, and then 10 minutes at dinner, all of that still counts. And we know that exercise is just so important, and exercise is going to help to lower your blood sugar. So we talked about that when our blood sugar is high, that's excess energy. And so what happens when we work out? We use that energy. So we actually use that extra glucose that's in our blood when we're physically active. So we want to make sure that we do have some structured activity. So that's like walking, biking, playing tennis, swimming, dancing. And then we also just increase our activity in our daily living. So say if we have a conference call, you know, maybe if we can put it on speaker, if we have a headset that's wireless, we can kind of walk around while we're talking, taking the stairs, parking in the back of the parking lot. I always say, like, if it's not like during COVID, drive-through is definitely the winner, but you know, during other things, trying to make sure you go in the store to take more steps and things like that. So in summary, type 2 diabetes can be a preventable disease. Some people are at an increased risk, we said, due to family history, but for the average person, that doesn't have to be your fate just because you have a family history of it. It can be prevented and better managed through weight loss and physical activity. So if you do have type 2 diabetes, you can sometimes come off your medication with weight loss and physical activity. Or if you're pre-diabetic, you can delay or prevent that diagnosis through weight loss and physical activity. And if you have diabetes, portion control and getting active will help to control your blood sugar. Do I have any questions out there? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see that. Any questions out there? All right. If we don't have any questions, then I will turn it over to Elizabeth Puckett, who's going to share some resources from the library with you guys.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'll be quick, I promise. Let's go ahead and share my screen. All right. Can everyone see the library homepage right here? We are going to go over a couple of places that will be a good place to start to find resources for you, and those will be right down here under Books, Research, and Database, which will be Libby for ebooks, Hoopla for ebooks, and video content as well. Anything else that will be interesting for you will be under our digital library, which looks like this. And then under our health resources, I did pull a few that I found the most interesting, and those will be in a flyer that we will send out afterwards, and it will look a lot like this. All of the titles are direct links to the items, such as this kind of self-care manual. I've grabbed a couple cookbooks that looked interesting for you as well. I also grabbed, and I thought this was interesting, it is the history of the discovery of insulin. That is available. You will also have on the little flyer, we have a fall reading challenge that started on the 7th, that anything that you read, you can log for points and chance to win things, including any of the resources on the flyer. We have how to get a library card, since we are still at this kind of curbside pickup limited services. You can get a card online with us, then swing by a branch and we will run a real card out to you and just put it in the trunk of your car. Same for books that you put on hold. We also have how to access Galileo and the Galileo password. You will need that for some of the more kind of specific articles and health resources. And that is it for me. I told you I would be quick. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns for me? Maddie, I think you will get a copy of the PowerPoint, but I don't want to speak for Alexa.
Yes, we'll get everything. All the resources, Elizabeth's, what Alexis talked about. Yeah, we'll get those out to you guys soon. And the recording as well.
Awesome. Yeah, Jessica, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, and I promise next time you'll be able to see my face. We had a little technical difficulties today, but I want to thank everybody for coming into our little wellness webinar. And don't forget, we have the next one on the 24th, and it's about portion control and substitutions, and that'll be from 12 to 1. And if you're interested, it'll be from the resources that we send. You'll just email the employee email, wellness email address, and you'll get the link for that. So thanks, guys, and we'll hopefully see you on the 24th.
Bye, you guys have a great day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great job.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you're still there, someone asked about any future face-to-face meetings, plans for future face-to-face.
Wonder, who was it? Did you see?
Cheryl?
Cheryl, I wonder. Because I mean, we're doing that. I have no clue about. I will email her. I can see for the near future, it'll be all the webinar type things like we're doing right now.
Yeah, we were assuming sometime next year we might be allowed in person, maybe.
That's what since we, if I can talk. So Kaiser, we've typically done like the fitness classes and other in-person classes, and they're probably talking it'll be second quarter.
Kaiser did roll out free on-demand class pass for everyone that has their insurance too.
Okay.
For the county, so that might be something.
Yes, Kaiser. So I'll put that in there too as well, because, and then we have they have a video library as well, and I can send that out.
They did the Calm app too. I've been playing with both of those.
Yep. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll send those out too as resources.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. See you guys later.
Okay.